Some creatures show up on a screen for 5 seconds, and your brain just goes, yeah, that thing lives there. You don't stop to ask whether it could have really evolved to what it is right now. You don't start doing bone density math in your head. It just kinda looks like a realistic creature. But why is that? Toothless from How to Train a Dragon, rushing through the air and slurping down fish feels as natural as a documentary. The Xenomorph moving through a corridor feels wrong in exactly the correct way. A monster hunter creature limping off after a fight feels like it has joints, weight, instincts, and bad days. A sandworm surfacing in Dune feels ancient even before it does anything. And then you get other creatures that should be easier to believe. Their anatomy is cleaner, their powers are less absorbed, and somehow they still feel fake. So, what actually decides that? Why does one impossible creature feel believable, while another one feels like a level designer intern dropped it into the map 20 minutes before launch? The answer has way less to do with realism than people think. What matters is whether the creature feels like a life form or like a prop. And the fastest way to break that illusion is also one of the most common mistakes in fantasy. A lot of creature design still treats creatures like decorations with teeth. They are there to block a road, jump the protagonist, stand behind the villain, or show up in a cool establishing shot so the world feels full. But if you actually look at how they behave, they're barely living things. They are functions. They appear when the plot needs tension, and vanish the second the job is done. But how does one make sure that doesn't happen? You see this a lot with random giant monsters that attack once, and are never contextualized. There isn't a nest or feeding signs or a territory. There's no reason they're there beyond to see did a big thing. Some fantasy games and movies are full of creatures that feel like they were placed with the same logic as a chest or a torch. And your brain notices that faster than people think. Because even if the creature looks great, if it feels like it only came into existence when the camera arrived, it starts feeling pretty fake. The design can look amazing, but if it has no life outside the moment, it's just a waste of design. That's why some settings feel so much stronger the second they show a creature doing anything unrelated to the protagonist. Monster Hunter is one of the clearest examples for this. A monster eating, limping away, sleeping, fighting for territory, dragging prey, or just existing in a space already does more for believability than 10 pages of lore. How to Train a Dragon also gets this immediately with Toothless. The moment he starts acting like something between a cat, a bird of prey, and a cautious wild animal, he starts feeling like a proper species, and not just a weird, awkward mascot. Subnautica does the same thing in a harsher way. Half the fear comes from seeing creatures that are clearly busy with their own business, until your stupid submarine makes it their problem. That's the first real solution. A believable creature feels like it had a schedule before the protagonist ruined it. That is the part most people underestimate the most. Don't get me wrong, appearance, silhouette, sound design, they all matter. But behavior is where your brain subconsciously or consciously decides whether something feels alive. If I show you a dragon perched on a high mountain, conserving movement, scanning territory, reacting aggressively only when something enters its space, that already feels more real than a better designed dragon that just screams and charges at everything all the time. If I show you a predator stalking, pausing, testing distance, backing off when the target looks dangerous, your brain starts reading it as an animal. If the same predator runs directly at every threat, like it has a contractual obligation to die in Act 2, it turns into a set dressing. Real predators are cautious to a degree that fiction often forgets. Most animals don't want the dramatic fight. A broken limb is a disaster in wildlife. A torn muscle can mean infection, starvation, death. Even apex predators avoid stupid risks when they can. Wolves test weakness, big cats stalk and abort hunts constantly. Sharks investigate. Orcas are terrifying, but even they do not waste effort throwing themselves into bad odds for no reason. And the second fictional creatures inherit their caution, they start feeling more convincing. That is one of the reasons the Xenomorph works so well. It is aggressive, obviously, but it still behaves like a predatory organism adapted to survival pressure, ambush, and opportunity. It feels purposeful. Wait, before we continue, I want to quickly show you something I've been building in the background. It's a free tool called Deep Dive. It's basically a video discovery platform for people like me who use YouTube to learn about all kinds of things, but don't want to waste half an hour digging through random search results, the same surface level beginner videos, or completely random videos. You type in any topic at all, and Deep Dive helps you find educational videos by topic, difficulty, and learning level, so you can build a more focused learning path for whatever you're trying to understand. It's still early, so I want to be transparent about this. It's not a complete giant library yet. But there is a fast topic request feature, so if a topic is missing or undercovered, it can be requested and added really quickly. It's completely free. I helped develop it myself, and honestly, I just built it because I wanted something like this to exist for people who learn through YouTube. So if that sounds useful, check out Deep Dive through the link in the description. And now back to the video. Toothless works for the opposite reason. He's expressive, emotionally readable, but his reactions are still grounded in animal behavior. He startles, tests, trusts slowly, guards his injury, learns through repetition, uses terrain, hesitates around unknown stimuli. Those details can often be overlooked, but they do a lot of heavy lifting. Compare that to a lot of weaker monster scenes where the creatures just attack to the death on sight. In reality, nature is full of apex predators acting like unemployed introverts. They conserve energy, and they don't want drama unless the reward is worth it. And honestly, that one change alone fixes a shocking number of fantasy creatures. But even consistent behavior isn't enough on its own, because a creature can behave well in one scene and still feel disconnected from the world around it. That's where the fun worldbuilding part comes in. Ecology. Wait, don't run away now. It's actually more simple than you might think. A creature starts feeling alive when you can notice it having been molded into what it is now by everything around it. If you can see that it was created by answering, what does it eat? What avoids it? What competes with it? Where does it sleep? How does it survive winter? What part of the map gets worse because it lives there? You already did all the work. And that's why ecology often matters more than the creature itself. Take Monster Hunter again, because it keeps being annoyingly good at this. The monsters don't just have fashionable creature designs and unique attack patterns. They actually occupy niches. Some are ambush predators. Some of them dominate a local region because they outcompete another species. Some scavenge. Some are opportunists that move in after a larger monster destabilizes the area. Pokémon is interesting here too, because when the franchise lets Pokémon interact naturally with habitats, hunting, sleep, or display to each other, they instantly feel more real. Pokémon Snap is probably one of the best examples for this. But the TV show, or modern games, are also not that bad in that regard. A lot of those creatures become believable the second they stop waiting for turn-based combat and start just being the wildlife they're actually supposed to be. A flock of bird Pokémon, scattering, something fishing at dawn, a predator circling its prey Pokémon, that tiny bit of ecological framing changes everything. That's the key change. The moment a creature changes and influences the environment around it, and vice versa, it stops feeling designed and starts feeling alive. If a creature is large, dangerous, or common and the world around it looks untouched, the illusion weakens fast. That's where a lot of creature design accidentally sabotages itself. The design team makes something huge and powerful, but the world behaves like nothing had to adapt to it. If dragons exist in meaningful number, architecture changes. If giant sea creatures exist, sea routes, coastal port cities, and trade change. If they don't, then the creature starts feeling isolated from the setting instead of integrated into it. And that ties into maybe the most important point in the whole video. Powers do not make creatures believable. Constraints do. Bad creature design loves infinite options. Infinite strength, infinite aggression, infinite mobility, infinite durability, no clear downside, and no environmental cost. A creature like that can still be fun, but it rarely feels real for long because reality, even stylized reality, is built out of limitations. When a creature has constraints, your brain starts working with it differently. Sandworms in Dune are a perfect example. They feel huge and mythic, but they're also tied to the desert in a very specific way. They react to vibration. They shape the ecology and the economy. They're inseparable from spice, territory, travel, and survival. But they don't feel believable because a giant worm is realistic. They feel believable because they are locked into a system of cause and effect. Toothless works because his abilities are focused and come with boundaries. He's agile because the design commits to aerodynamic logic. He hunts with stealth and burst movement rather than infinite dragon nonsense. His body language and fighting style supports the role the world gives him. To be honest, almost all the dragon species in How to Train Your Dragon have such a unique cause and effect design. But even creatures that are way more exaggerated can pull this off. The graboid from Tremors makes no sense when you say it out loud. Giant underground predator that senses movements and erupts from below. But it works because the constraints are clear. It needs ground vibration. Terrain matters, and human behavior changes around it to not get attacked. The creature doesn't feel random because the story actually lets its limitations structure the world. And once a creature has to pay for what it can do, it feels like it belongs to a real set of survival influences instead of author favoritism. That payment doesn't have to be fully scientific, by the way. It just has to be coherent. Maybe your dragon needs a huge territory because flight and fire are costly. Maybe your shapeshifter can only mimic what it has observed. Maybe your giant sea predator has to surface at vulnerable times. Maybe your energy creature overheats or becomes sluggish after using its breath. The point is that limitations create believable decisions. Without them, powers stay abstract. With them, behavior starts making sense. And then movement comes in, and either seals the illusion or completely destroys it. Movement is one of those things people only notice when it goes wrong. But it might be the most immediate believability test of all. Your brain can forgive impossible anatomy weirdly fast. What it does not forgive is movement that has no logic. That's why the Xenomorph works so well across its best appearances. It moves with a mix of predatory caution, insect-like suddenness, and a kind of anatomical discomfort that still feels controlled. Cloverfield is another good case. The creature's motion feels unstable and half injured in a way that sells size and confusion. It doesn't move like a polished boss monster. It moves like something enormous that barely fits the city and is still figuring itself out while breaking everything. Monster Hunter creatures succeed here constantly. Limping, weight shifts, head tracking, hesitation before commitment, how they plant their feet before impact, how they recover after missing an attack. Then you get weaker creatures with perfectly decent designs ruined by terrible movement. No weight, no inertia, no balance adjustment. Limbs swinging like noodles or stomping like someone forgot the creature is supposed to have joints. At that point, the whole thing falls apart, no matter how good the concept art was. It's weird. The human brain can survive cosmic horror, but apparently it draws the line at bad walking cycles. And movement feeds directly into another major problem: creatures becoming too human in the wrong way. That's a subtle one, because some creature stories absolutely should humanize their monsters. The problem is not emotion or intelligence, the problem is when a creature behaves less like something shaped by environment and more like an actor in face paint following dramatic cues. A lot of fake feeling creatures are basically angry people in costumes. They monologue, they posture in very human ways, they make strategic choices that only make sense if they've read the screenplay. They attack or spare characters at moments that serve drama better than survival. That breaks immersion very fast, unless the creature is explicitly supposed to be sapient in a human adjacent way. Sharks don't monologue, deep sea predators don't do intimidation speeches. Even highly intelligent animals on Earth still express their intelligence through bodies and behaviors shaped by the environments they come from. Orcas are smart, but they're smart like marine hunters with social learning, not like sarcastic office managers with fins. That's why creature design gets stronger when the intelligence stays ecologically legible. A dragon can absolutely be smart. A sea monster can plan. A Pokémon can be emotionally readable. But the more their behavior still feels shaped by niche, body habitat, and evolutionary pressure, the more believable it becomes. That's one of the reasons some versions of Godzilla work better than others. When Godzilla feels like a force with animal logic, so territorial, reactive, disruptive, and bound to environmental consequences, the creature lands. When the performance drifts too far into pure symbolic action without grounding, believability drops even if spectacle goes up. And then there's the contradiction at the center of all of this. Some creatures should be absorbed, and they still work. Dragons should not be easy to believe. Giant worms should not be easy to believe. Kaiju should not be easy to believe. A lot of Pokemon should obviously not be easy to believe. And yet, people accept them all the time. Why is that? Because your brain does not actually demand possibility, it demands coherence. If a creature follows rules, behaves consistently, affects the world in ways that make sense, and seems shaped by actual influences rather than by whim, people accept a shocking amount. You can get away with impossible anatomy, impossible scale, powers, but inconsistency, purposelessness, and world disconnection get punished immediately. That's why Pokemon can feel believable even though the franchise is full of creatures that are biologically nonsense, if you take them literally. The ones that land usually land because they have coherent behavior, ecological hints, or clear social logic. Same with dragons in stories that actually commit to what dragons do to architecture, travel, war, and territory. Same with kaiju in stories where their presence transforms the world around them. Believability is about whether the world seems to have made room for the creature. If the answer is yes, your brain cooperates. And there's one more layer on top of that. Some of the most memorable creatures feel understandable. And I don't mean they feel human, but understandable. There's a distinction in that. Toothless works because we can read his intentions naturally: curiosity, caution, irritation, excitement, and trust. None of that requires him to act like a little person with scales. It works because the behavior is readable through body language and response patterns that feel observed. A lot of great creature design does this. The animals in Avatar often feel understandable because their social and movement logic is clearly communicated. Some Pokemon become iconic because their behavior lines up cleanly with what their design suggests. Certain versions of Godzilla feel emotionally legible even when they're not literally emoting much, because the framing and behavior let you infer a stable inner logic. That's where the best creature design starts feeling almost documentary like. You're not being told what the creature is, you feel like you're watching it. That's a huge difference. The best creatures do not just feel designed, they feel observed. And once the setting can do that, creature design starts affecting the entire world instead of feeling cosmetic. Because believable creatures shape everything around them. They change ecosystems, fear, mythology, and they change architecture, travel, warfare, and religion and trade. That's why believable creature design matters so much. A convincing creature does not just improve one scene, it upgrades the whole setting. The world starts feeling like it existed before the camera arrived, and will keep existing after it leaves. And once that happens, every part of the fiction benefits. A city feels more real because of the predator it was built to survive. A map feels more real because species distribution changes how people move through it. That's also why creature heavy settings often become memorable even when the plot itself is simple. People remember worlds that feel inhabited. So if I go all the way back to the opening question, why does one impossible creature feel believable while another one feels fake? The answer is not some magic realism formula. Usually it comes down to a handful of very grounded things. Does it behave consistently? Does it seem shaped by an environment? Does it have limits? Does it move like a body instead of a prop? Does the world around it react like the creature has been there for a long time? And does it feel understandable without turning into a person in a monster suit? Most fictional creatures are impossible. That part was never the problem. The good ones work because they feel like they belong somewhere, like they evolved under the pressure of their environment, like their world had to make room for them. And the moment a creature feels like it could go on existing without a story, that's when it stops feeling fictional. That's when your lovely brain accepts it as real.